All right, so today we're going to be learning how to solve percent problems with an equation. Some of us after this lesson are going to develop a preference, whether you use the proportion or the equation. It is going to be up to you in the future. Today, I really want you to focus on using this equation, not going back to that proportion. And when you do your homework for this, make sure you're using the equation, not the proportion, because I do want you to learn this skill. And then after today, you can really choose which one you prefer and when you want to use um, either the proportion or the equation, unless like in the directions of something it tells you use the percent equation or use the percent proportion. You'll be able to choose. All right, so let's go back to that A, W, P, and 100. We just want to define what those letters mean. Remember, our A was our part, our W was our whole, our P was our percent, and our 100 was just what percent was out of. We're not going to be using that 100 in the equation. All right, our percent equation is A equals P times W. Okay, however, now in this lesson, we are going to have to convert that percent to a decimal because you can't multiply like 20% times 50. Like let's say our whole was 50, we can't do 20% times 50. We'd have to make that 20% into a decimal. Remember, we do that by moving that decimal 2 times to the left. So we would do like 0.20 times 50 instead of 20%. Okay, so that's a big thing. Make sure that we are converting that percent to a decimal. All right, let's just go through some examples of using this equation. So we are going to be finding the part in these problems because we're given the percent and we're given what the number's out of, which would be 50 or whole. So we always start off with that equation A equals P times W. Now we're missing our part, so we're always going to have an A for these first two examples because we don't know what that part is. Our percent we're going to make into a decimal by moving it 2 to the left. And then we're going to plug in what our whole is, which is 50. We're just going to use our calculator in order to solve this. So we're going to take 0.24 times 50 equals 12. All right. Pause the video, try this next one on your own. Same exact as the first example. Resume the video to check. Always start off with our equation, A equals PW. We've got our part missing, so we're just going to leave it as an A. We know our percent is 10, but we have to make it into a decimal, so it becomes 0.10 or 10 hundredths. We are going to multiply that by our whole, which is 20. In our calculator, we take 0.10 or 10 hundredths times 20 to get 2. Okay, so like I said, some of us are going to prefer the equation over the proportion because it seemed to go a little bit faster. But again, that's going to be up to you to choose unless a problem tells you. Again, for this lesson, though, I need you to choose the equation, so we learn that skill. 9.5 is what percent? So here we are missing the percent. We always start off with that equation, A equals P times W. We are missing that P, so in that equation, we're going to still have a P. 9.5 is some percent of 25. So 9.5 is our part because that's equal to that percent of our whole number, which is 25. We want to get that P by itself, so how do we undo times 25? Well, we divide by 25. We get P equals, in our calculator, we take 9.5 divided by 25, and we get 0.38. Now, this is tricky because this is a decimal as an answer, but we want to know what percent. So now we have to convert that decimal into a percent to get 38% as our answer. Okay, when we're using the equation, since we convert percents into decimals, we have to convert decimals into percents when we get that as our answer. Again, pause the video, try the second one on your own, and then resume the video to check. We have A equals P W. Our part is 18. We don't know our percent. Our whole is 20. We want to get that P by itself, so we have to divide by 20 to both sides. To get that to cancel out, in our calculator we take 18 divided by 20. We get 0.9. That is a decimal as an answer. We want to know the percent, so we move it over twice, fill in that space at the 0. That becomes 90%. All right. Last type of problem is when we are missing that whole. Okay, so our part is 39. Our percent is 52%. So we make that into a decimal. That becomes 0.52. Our whole we are missing, so we just write that as a W. All right, so we want to get that W by itself. So we are going to divide by 52 hundredths. We do that in our calculator. We get W equals, we take 39 divided by 52 hundredths to get 75. So what that means is 39 is 52% of the number 75. Pause the video, try this one on your own, resume to check. One thing I forgot in my last problem was to write our equation. My bad. All right, so our part is 90. Our percent is 18%. We have to make that into a decimal. Times our whole. We don't know what the whole is. We want to get that W by itself, so we divide by 18 hundredths. We take in our calculator 90 divided by 0.18 to get 500. What this means is that 90 is 18% of the number 500. All right, let's go into some real world situation, because they're not really like word problems, just more real world situation type problems. So we want to find the percent of sale tax on the food total. Okay, we're using that equation. So we have our part equals our percent times our whole. We want to find the percent. So in that equation, we're going to be left with a P because we don't know what the percent is. Okay, our whole entire bill comes to $27.50. Now we're not going to multiply it by with the tax included because we want to know what percent is this tax of what we were being charged. Okay, so we want to use that food total, not that subtotal. Okay, and then that tax is equal to $1.65. That's our part. We want to know what percent is $1.65 of $27.50. So we want to get that P by itself. We divide by $27.50. We can do that in our calculator. We take 1.65 divided by $27.50 to get 0.06. We make that into a percent because we were missing a percent. We move it over twice. That tax was 6%. We want to find the amount of a 16% tip on the food total. Okay, now we're gonna not tip on the tax, we're just the food total, not the subtotal. So we want to find A equals PW. We want to find the amount of the tip, which is going to be our part. So we're going to leave it as an A. We have 16%, so we move that decimal over twice to make it 16 hundredths. And our food total is $27.50. We take $27.50 times 16 hundredths to get 4.4. Again, this answer should be a dollar amount, so we should add a zero, add a dollar sign. $4.40. Number 6. A salesperson receives 2.5% commission on sales. So commission is like a car dealership, where if you sell someone like a $200,000 car, you make like a percent of that sale for yourself. So like if it's a 5% commission, you'd find what is 5% of that $200,000, and that's what you get to keep. Another industry that does commission is real estate. So when you're selling a house, you hire a real estate agent and they get to keep like, let's say like 3% of whatever you sold your house for. What else does commission? Like some stores do commission. It really just depends on the industry, but those are just some examples. A salesperson receives 2.5% commission on sales. What commission does a salesperson receive for $8,000 in sales? So we always start off with our equation. We have our percent, that's 2.5%. I made a mistake there because I got tricked up here since there's already a decimal, but that's a percent. It's not an actual number decimal. So we need to move it over, fill in our zeros. Oops, I filled in an extra 0. So it goes 1, 2. So we have 0.025 times our whole, which is $8,000 was how much the sale was, because we need to know how much was their commission. We want to know what part of that $8,000 do they get to keep. So in our calculator, we take 0.025 times, 0.025 times 8,000, and we get 200. So what this means is, like, let's say they sold a diamond ring for $8,000. Okay, so then that jewelry salesman gets 2.5% of that commission, meaning that since they sold that $8,000 ring, they get to keep $200 of that sale, which is kind of cool. Again, dollar amount, so add in our dollar sign, and we are good to go. So this is how we use the equation. Again, like I said, for the rest of this lesson, for your homework on this lesson, I want you to use the equation to solve. After this lesson, you can choose which method you like best on like a quiz or test, unless in the directions it says use the proportion or use the equation specifically, then you'd have to do it that way. But for the majority of the problems, you'll be able to choose which one you like better.